What if the only thing standing between you and the life you dream of is your own mind? This audiobook is your blueprint for breaking mental limits, rewiring your reality, and awakening unstoppable growth. Your future self is calling. Will you answer? Introduction. There's a moment, often subtle, often quiet, when something inside you starts to ache for more. Not more in the material sense, not the kind of more that screams for attention or validation, but a deeper, richer kind of more. A knowing that whispers to you between the noise of your days, during the stillness of early mornings, or in the restless quiet of your nights. It's a knowing that says, this isn't all there is to me. It's a longing, not just for change, but for transformation. A pull toward growth so real, it almost feels like grief. If you've ever sat alone and wondered why your progress feels stalled despite all your effort, if you've silently questioned whether you're meant for something greater and simply don't know how to unlock it, this audiobook was made for you. This journey is not about fixing what's broken, because you are not broken. It's about remembering what's been buried, forgotten, or conditioned out of you, and rebuilding your mindset in a way that aligns with your highest potential. Welcome to Shift Your Mind, Change Your Life, the psychology of growth. This isn't just another motivational piece to hype you up for a few days before you fall back into old patterns. This is a process, a mirror, a deep, soul-led journey into the internal mechanics of how we think, why we get stuck, and what it truly takes to grow, not on the surface, but at the level that actually sustains change. You're going to step into a space of clarity, honesty, and radical self-awareness. You're not just going to understand the science of change, you're going to feel it, breathe it, and live it. This audiobook is built around one core truth. The life you want is waiting on the other side of the mindset you haven't stepped into yet. Everything you desire, your peace, your power, your purpose, exists just beyond the limits of the identity you've been conditioned to believe is you. And in this space, we're going to break that identity wide open and rebuild it with intention. By the end of this audiobook, you won't be the same person who started it. That's not marketing fluff. It's a promise if you commit. Because this experience is not passive. This isn't about consuming content. It's about engaging in real internal change. Through this journey, you'll learn how your subconscious beliefs were formed, how they've directed your life without your awareness, and how to rewire them for empowerment. You'll understand the neurological basis of habits, resistance, self-sabotage, and emotional blocks, and more importantly, how to break through them with clarity and compassion. You'll stop treating your triggers like flaws and start seeing them as gateways. You'll learn how to emotionally self-regulate instead of spiraling, and you'll begin to rebuild your inner narrative, the one you tell yourself when no one's around, into something that finally supports the life you want to create. To get the most from this experience, you need to know one thing. How you listen matters. Transformation doesn't come from listening while distracted, skimming for the next big insight, or rushing through chapters like a checklist. This is a sacred space to slow down, to feel, to connect with yourself on a level that everyday life rarely allows. That means giving yourself permission to pause when something hits you, reflect when an idea resonates, write when a truth rises to the surface. There are moments in this audiobook designed for exactly that. Pauses, breath work, short exercises, journaling cues. Please don't skip them. Growth doesn't live in information. It lives in integration. You already know a lot. You've probably read more than enough. But what will make this journey different is how deeply you engage with what you feel, not just what you hear. Before we dive deeper, let's orient ourselves with the foundation of this entire process, the psychology of growth. Human beings are wired to evolve, but we're also wired to resist change. At the core of every stuck place in your life is a psychological loop, a pattern your mind repeats, not because it serves you, but because it feels familiar. Your nervous system is calibrated for what it knows, not what it needs. So even if something is painful, dysfunctional, or limiting, if it's familiar, your brain will cling to it. That's not weakness. That's biology. But once you become aware of that mechanism, you're no longer powerless to it. You can learn to override it. You can teach your brain, your body, and your beliefs to orient around new emotional truths. That's what neuroplasticity makes possible. Your brain doesn't stop changing at 25. It changes as long as you give it a reason to. This audiobook is your reason. Let's talk about what's actually keeping most people stuck. It's not lack of intelligence, talent, or ambition. It's not laziness or procrastination either. It's unresolved internal resistance, the deep-rooted fear that if you grow, you'll lose love, safety, or control. It's subconscious programming from childhood, past trauma, inherited beliefs, and societal conditioning. It's the invisible psychological contracts you made with yourself to stay small so you wouldn't be rejected, hurt, or overwhelmed. And here's the truth most people never hear. You don't need to hustle your way out of that. You need to heal your way through it. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go beneath the surface of performance, beyond productivity hacks, and into the real emotional infrastructure of growth. Because true transformation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming fully yourself, unapologetically and intentionally. Each chapter of this audiobook is built to take you deeper into the layers of your own psychology. We'll explore self-awareness, identity formation, belief systems, emotional regulation, trauma response, behavioral patterns, decision-making, habit formation, relationship dynamics, and personal power. You won't just learn how to change. You'll learn why you haven't yet. And that's the most important piece. When you understand the emotional roots of your resistance, when you stop demonizing your defense mechanisms and start decoding them, everything begins to shift. You stop forcing change from a place of shame and start inviting growth from a place of deep, loving clarity. That's how you create a life that doesn't just look good on the outside, but feels right on the inside. There's something powerful about listening to words that remind you of who you are beneath all the noise. As you move through this audiobook, you'll hear things that stir something in you. Old truths you've forgotten, new truths you've never heard, and sacred truths you've always known deep down, but never fully trusted. Let those words in. Let them breathe in your nervous system. Let them interrupt your patterns, because sometimes the smallest shift in perspective can create the biggest change in direction. One thought can change your day. One belief can change your life. One decision to lean into growth, even when it's uncomfortable, can alter your entire path. This journey is an invitation to make that decision again and again, with courage, softness, and presence. And if at any point you feel overwhelmed, doubtful, or afraid, that's okay. That's actually a sign you're on the right track. Growth feels unfamiliar because it is. You're moving toward a version of yourself that doesn't exist yet, and that will always feel a little unsteady. But you're not alone. I'll be right here with you, voice to voice, chapter by chapter, guiding you through the mental terrain of transformation. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know exactly where you're going. You just have to be willing to begin. So if you're ready, not for a quick fix, but for a real shift, then let's begin. Not with pressure, not with performance, but with presence. This is the start of something honest, something powerful, something deeply, beautifully yours. Welcome to the journey of remembering, reclaiming, and rebuilding the most important relationship you will ever have, the one with your own mind. Chapter 1. Understanding Mindset. There are moments in life that feel like quiet earthquakes, subtle, almost imperceptible shifts that change everything. You might not notice them right away, but their effects echo through your days, your decisions, your direction. You might stumble upon them while driving alone in silence, during a sleepless night full of reflection, or while listening to a story that unexpectedly cracks something open in you. Perhaps this moment, right here, right now, is one of those. Because if you've come to this book with even the smallest spark of curiosity, the tiniest whisper that your life could look different, feel fuller, or stretch further than it does today, then you've already begun to shift. And here's the truth. Most people never hear plainly enough. The power to reshape your reality doesn't begin with a dramatic action, a life overhaul, or a sudden stroke of genius. It begins quietly, internally, with the most underrated yet transformative force you possess, your mindset. Your mindset is not a motivational buzzword. It is not about positive thinking or reciting inspirational quotes into the mirror every morning. At its core, your mindset is the internal blueprint that determines how you interpret experiences, respond to challenges, perceive failure, and believe in growth. It is the lens through which you see your world and yourself, and like any lens, it can be dirty or clear, narrow or wide, stuck or evolving. Most importantly, it's not hardwired. It's not carved into stone. Your mindset is fluid, shapeable, an internal ecosystem that you and only you can choose to cultivate. Understanding the nature of mindset is the first step in shifting it, and to understand it, we must explore two fundamental psychological frameworks: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. The terms fixed and growth mindset were popularized by Dr. Carol Dweck, a Stanford psychologist whose research changed how we understand motivation, learning, and success. But these aren't just academic concepts. They show up in your everyday life more often than you think. A fixed mindset, put simply, is the belief that your traits, your intelligence, talents, personality, or capacity to grow are essentially static. People with fixed mindsets believe you either have it or you don't. If they struggle with a task, they see it as evidence of inadequacy. If they fail, they feel exposed. They often avoid challenges, resist feedback, and retreat into comfort zones because anything less than instant success is perceived as a threat to their worth. And because failure feels final, they will often settle, convincing themselves that certain doors were never meant to open for them in the first place. In contrast, a growth mindset is the belief that your abilities can be developed through effort, learning, and resilience. A person with a growth mindset doesn't deny difficulty or pretend that anything is possible with blind optimism. Instead, they approach challenges as opportunities. They understand that failure isn't a verdict, but a teacher. They seek feedback not because it feels good, but because it sharpens them. Most importantly, they separate their identity from their performance. They know that who they are today is not the limit of who they can become. The difference between these two mindsets may seem philosophical, but in practice, the implications are enormous. They shape how we parent, lead, love, learn, take risks, and recover from failure. Your mindset doesn't just affect your outcomes, it defines your journey. It's important to pause here and dismantle a common misconception. No one has a purely fixed or purely growth mindset. These mindsets are not permanent labels, but patterns, mental habits that show up in different contexts. You may have a growth mindset about relationships, believing they can evolve with effort and communication, but a fixed mindset about money, convinced that your financial situation can't improve. You may be open to feedback in your creative life, but defensive in your professional one. The goal is not to label yourself, but to observe yourself. Where do you contract? Where do you expand? Becoming aware of these tendencies is the beginning of transformation. Growth starts the moment you become curious about your own mental programming. Let's take a real example. Imagine someone named Maya. Maya has always considered herself bad at math. That identity was cemented in middle school when she failed a couple of tests and overheard a teacher casually mention to a colleague, "She's more of a creative type." Without realizing it, Maya internalized that belief. Over the years, anytime she encountered a math-related task, budgeting, data analysis, anything involving numbers, she shut down, avoided, or delegated. That belief affected her confidence, narrowed her job opportunities, and even impacted her self-worth. Not because she lacked the ability to improve, but because she had already decided it was impossible. Her fixed mindset built a wall around that part of her potential and locked the gate. Now imagine Maya discovering the concept of growth mindset. For the first time, she considers that her identity as bad at math isn't a life sentence, but a story, one she's been telling herself for years. She begins to explore the subject in small, manageable ways, maybe using an app to practice or watching tutorials that frame learning as a process, not a performance. Over time, she makes mistakes, struggles, but doesn't retreat. With every small breakthrough, the old narrative loosens its grip. She's not magically transformed overnight, but she's growing. And because her mindset has shifted, so has her reality. This isn't just Maya's story, it's yours. Somewhere in your life, there is a belief you've mistaken for truth, a story you've accepted as unchangeable. It could be about your intelligence, your relationships, your career, your worthiness, your ability to heal. You might not even be conscious of it. That's how powerful and subtle fixed mindsets can be. They masquerade as facts. But facts are universal. Beliefs are personal. And beliefs can be reprogrammed. The first step is to identify where they live. To do that, ask yourself, in what area of my life do I feel most stuck, frustrated, or defeated? What patterns repeat themselves there? What assumptions do I hold about myself in that space? And most revealing of all, what do I believe is possible for me in that area? The answers will tell you more than you expect. Our mindsets don't appear out of nowhere. They are shaped over time through experience by family, culture, education, trauma, and repetition. Often, we inherit our mindsets from our environment without realizing it. A child raised by perfectionist parents may absorb the message that mistakes are unacceptable, leading to a fear of failure and an over-reliance on external validation. Someone who grows up in an environment where vulnerability is mocked may develop a mindset that associates openness with weakness. These early impressions become neural pathways, default modes of thinking that replay until they are challenged. But challenge doesn't come naturally. It must be chosen. And that choice begins with awareness. Neuroscience now backs up what philosophers and spiritual teachers have said for centuries. We can change our minds, literally. The brain is not fixed. It is plastic, adaptable, rewiring itself through repeated thoughts, actions, and experiences. This means that the more you practice growth-oriented thinking, the more natural it becomes. It's like strengthening a muscle. At first, it feels unnatural. It may even feel fake. But with consistent use, it becomes part of your cognitive reflex. The challenge is that most people never give themselves enough time or space to make the shift. They dip their toe in change, expect instant results, and retreat at the first sign of discomfort. But growth isn't supposed to feel safe. It's supposed to feel different. That's how you know you're doing it right. Let's return to you. Right now. I want you to consider a specific moment, recent or distant, when you gave up on something because it felt too hard, too foreign, or too much. Now ask yourself, was it the task that defeated you, or your belief about your ability to overcome it? Was it truly your limit, or a mental boundary you didn't yet know how to cross? What if the only thing that needs to change isn't the world around you, but the way you see your place in it? That shift alone can create a ripple effect that touches every corner of your life, Because once you stop seeing struggle as proof of inadequacy and start seeing it as part of the path, you gain access to a new dimension of self-trust. A mindset shift is not about pretending everything is fine. It's about realizing that even when it's not, you still have agency, you still have power, you still have choice, and that choice can begin as small as reframing one thought. Instead of, "I'm terrible at this," you say, "This is new for me, and I'm learning." Instead of, "I always screw this up," you try, "This time, I'm paying attention to what's different." These may sound like subtle differences, but subtle shifts in language create seismic shifts in perception. And perception is what defines your world. So here's where we land for now. Your mindset is not your personality. It's not your fate. It's a pattern. And patterns can be changed intentionally, gradually, and powerfully. This chapter isn't about solving everything. It's about shining a light on the engine driving your behavior so you can start steering your own course. It's about looking at your life through a different lens, noticing what's been automatic, and deciding what deserves a second look. Because when you start to question the beliefs that hold you, you begin to reclaim the life that's waiting for you. Change doesn't begin in action. It begins in thought. And the most profound shifts begin with the quiet realization that maybe, just maybe, you're capable of more than you've allowed yourself to believe. Chapter 2. The Formation of Belief Systems. The Invisible Architects of Your Reality. We all walk around with stories in our heads. Stories about who we are, what we're capable of, what the world will or won't allow. But most of us never stop to question where those stories came from. We accept them as truth because they were woven into our thoughts so early, so subtly, that we rarely even notice they're there. They're like wallpaper in a childhood bedroom. We grew up surrounded by them, and now they've become so familiar we don't even see them anymore. But they shape everything. Every decision you make, every fear you hold, every dream you suppress or chase, every relationship you keep or leave. All of it is filtered through the lens of your belief system. And if we're going to shift your mind and change your life, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to understand who planted those beliefs, how they grew, and why they've been so hard to pull out. Let me be clear. Belief systems are not just spiritual or philosophical ideas. They're mental frameworks, deeply ingrained narratives we carry about ourselves, others, and the world at large. They're formed early, often before we've even developed the ability to critically analyze or question what we're absorbing. By the time we're 7 years old, our subconscious mind has already absorbed most of the core messages that will shape our self-image and worldview for decades to come. Think about that. Before we even had a say in who we wanted to be, someone else's words, tone, energy, and limitations had already begun scripting our internal dialogue. That doesn't mean we're doomed to live by those early scripts forever. But it does mean that if we want to rewrite our lives, we have to uncover where the old drafts came from. Our belief systems are not just taught, they are modeled. As children, we learn less from what adults tell us and more from what they consistently show us. A parent who says, "You can be anything you want," but constantly complains about their own job, reinforces the belief that dreams are a luxury, not a reality. A teacher who praises intelligence but mocks mistakes can unintentionally teach that worth is tied to perfection. A caregiver who withdraws affection during emotional moments teaches that vulnerability is unsafe. These messages don't arrive all at once. They accumulate like dust on a mirror, gradually clouding our ability to see ourselves clearly. Over time, they form the architecture of our subconscious programming. Let me share a story. A man named Jordan grew up in a home where money was always tight. His parents fought about it constantly. The message he heard again and again wasn't just that money was scarce, but that wanting money was selfish. His father often criticized wealthy people, calling them greedy, dishonest, or out of touch. Jordan didn't question these narratives. Why would he? As a child, he absorbed them like oxygen. Fast forward to adulthood, and Jordan finds himself stuck. No matter how hard he works, he sabotages financial opportunities. He undercharges for his services, avoids investing, and feels uncomfortable when others talk about wealth. It's not that he doesn't want financial security. It's that his belief system tells him that having more means becoming someone he doesn't want to be. Until Jordan becomes aware of this hidden belief, no amount of ambition or effort will stick. His inner world is at war with his outer goals. This is how powerful belief systems are. They operate beneath our awareness, yet they dictate the rules of our life. You can have the best intentions, the biggest dreams, the most detailed plan, but if your beliefs are out of alignment, you will find yourself circling the same mountains over and over again. You'll think you're procrastinating or lazy or unlucky, when really, you're being ruled by outdated software. And here's the most dangerous part. Belief systems don't need to be true to be effective. They just need to be familiar. Your brain prefers the known over the unknown, even if the known is painful or limiting. That's why people stay in toxic relationships, jobs they hate, habits that deplete them. The familiarity creates a false sense of safety. But safety isn't the same as freedom. And familiarity isn't the same as truth. To change your belief systems, you must first become aware of them. That begins with curiosity, not criticism. Ask yourself, what are the recurring patterns in my life? Where do I feel stuck, no matter what I try? What emotions surface when I imagine having more? More success? More love? More freedom? Often, the answer isn't on the surface. It's buried in the emotional responses you've learned to normalize. For example, if the thought of success brings anxiety, it may be tied to an old belief that success equals pressure or loss of freedom. If deep love makes you want to pull away, it could be tied to a belief that intimacy leads to abandonment. These beliefs don't make you broken. They make you human. They were formed as protective mechanisms, but protection is no longer the goal. Growth is. Let's go deeper. Belief systems often form in response to emotional experiences, especially those that were repeated or traumatic. If you were constantly told you were too sensitive, you may have developed a belief that emotions are a liability. If your efforts were rarely acknowledged, you may believe that nothing you do is ever enough. These aren't just ideas. They are emotional imprints. They live in your nervous system. That's why you can't simply think your way out of them. You have to feel your way through them. You have to get honest about the moments that shaped you, the words that wounded, the silences that screamed, the expectations you absorbed like commandments. This is not about blaming others. It's about reclaiming the narrative, because what was done to you may not have been your fault, but healing it is your responsibility. You may be wondering, if belief systems are so embedded, how do we begin to change them? The first step is awareness. You cannot shift what you do not see. The second step is truth-telling. Once you've identified an old belief, challenge it. Ask, who gave me this belief? What evidence have I gathered to support it? And most importantly, does this belief still serve me? Sometimes, just shining a light on a belief is enough to loosen its grip. But often, you'll need to actively replace it with something new, something true. This takes repetition, emotional engagement, and time. But remember, beliefs were not formed in a day. They were installed through years of repetition. You don't need to rush the process. You just need to begin. I want to invite you to create what I call a belief inventory. Choose one area of your life where you feel resistance, relationships, health, money, confidence, and write down every belief you hold in that domain. Don't filter or judge, just let them come. Then, beside each one, ask, is this belief empowering or limiting? Where did it come from? What belief would I rather hold instead? This exercise is powerful, not because it instantly changes everything, but because it forces you to become conscious of what's been unconscious. And consciousness is the first step to change. As we close this part of the chapter, I want you to remember this. Your beliefs are not facts. They are not mandates. They are not your destiny. They are stories, and stories can be rewritten. You are allowed to outgrow them. You are allowed to question them. You are allowed to build a new inner foundation, brick by brick, word by word, belief by belief. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to do it intentionally. Because every time you choose a new belief, no matter how small, you are telling your mind, your body, and your life, I'm ready for something different. I'm ready for something more. Chapter 3. The Power of Self-Awareness. The mirror you've been avoiding. There's a reason so many of us avoid looking too deeply within ourselves. It's not because we're lazy or uninterested. It's because deep down, we know what we might find. We're afraid we'll uncover something we can't unsee. The mistakes we haven't owned, the truths we've buried, the dreams we've delayed, the habits we've let run unchecked. We're afraid of realizing that the life we're living is smaller than the one we're capable of creating. And yet, paradoxically, that fear is precisely what keeps us from changing. It convinces us to stay busy, distracted, reactive. It tells us we're too tired, too overwhelmed, too late in the game to pause and reflect. But here's the truth. Without self-awareness, real growth is impossible. You can read every self-help book, listen to every podcast, sign up for every course, and still be spinning in circles if you haven't done the brave and necessary work of knowing yourself. Self-awareness isn't a luxury. It's the foundation of transformation. It's the mirror that doesn't lie and the key that unlocks everything else. Let's start with what self-awareness really is and what it isn't. It's not about obsessively analyzing yourself, picking apart every move, or living in your head. True self-awareness is deeper, calmer, and more compassionate. It's the ability to witness your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and patterns without getting swallowed by them. It's being able to name what you're feeling, understand where it came from, and choose how to respond rather than reacting on autopilot. It's about becoming an active participant in your own internal world, not just a passive observer being dragged around by it. Most people think they're self-aware because they know their personality traits or have done some therapy. But real self-awareness goes beyond intellectual insight. It's not about what you know. It's about what you notice, especially in the moments that challenge or trigger you. It's noticing when you shut down in a conversation. It's catching the tightness in your chest before you snap at someone. It's recognizing that the thing you're judging in someone else is actually a mirror of something unresolved in you. Think of self-awareness like emotional literacy. Just like you had to learn how to read and write, you have to learn how to understand and navigate your inner world. And just like literacy opens up your ability to learn, communicate, and expand, self-awareness opens up your capacity to grow, connect, and evolve. It gives you access to the deeper layers beneath your actions. Without it, you're just managing symptoms, chasing new habits, goals, or fixes without addressing the root cause. But when you cultivate self-awareness, you start to notice the real mechanics of your life. You understand why you keep attracting the same kind of people, why you get defensive during feedback, why you sabotage success right before you reach it. You see how your past is shaping your present, and once you see it, you can finally change it. But here's the catch. Self-awareness requires slowing down. And slowing down is hard in a world that rewards speed, distraction, and constant output. Most people are so overstimulated that they don't even realize how disconnected they've become from their own inner world. We wake up and check our phones before we've even checked in with ourselves. We drown discomfort in scrolling, food, noise, or work. We mistake busyness for purpose and reactivity for passion. But true self-awareness asks us to pause, to sit in silence, to listen. And that can be uncomfortable, especially if you're not used to being alone with your thoughts. But discomfort is not danger. It's data. It's telling you what needs attention. When you stop numbing or rushing past it, discomfort becomes a map, not something to avoid, but something to explore. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman named Elena who was highly successful on the outside, sharp, driven, constantly achieving. But inside, she felt numb and restless. No matter how much she accomplished, there was always this low hum of dissatisfaction. She couldn't explain it, and so she kept pushing, thinking the next milestone would fix it. But it didn't. One day, after yet another achievement that felt hollow, she broke down. She took a break, unplugged, and began journaling. At first, it was awkward. She didn't know what to write. But as she kept going, something opened. She started noticing things. The way she rushed through her days without breathing. How her self-worth was tangled in productivity. How she hadn't actually asked herself what she wanted in years. She started to see the cost of her disconnection. And that awareness changed everything. Not all at once, but it planted a seed. She began choosing differently. Not perfectly, but intentionally. That's the power of self-awareness. It doesn't guarantee instant transformation, but it breaks the spell. It interrupts the autopilot and puts the steering wheel back in your hands. It creates a gap between stimulus and response, a space where choice becomes possible. And in that space, you become the author again, not just the actor. But here's what most people misunderstand. Self-awareness isn't just about internal reflection. It's also about external feedback. We all have blind spots, ways we show up that we can't see because we're too close to them. That's why self-awareness also requires humility. It means being willing to ask, how do others experience me? Not to seek validation, but to gain perspective. It means learning to separate your intent from your impact. You might think you're being honest, but others experience you as harsh. You might think you're helping, but others feel controlled. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. But until you open yourself up to feedback, you'll keep repeating the same patterns, thinking you're being misunderstood, when really, you're just unaware. Self-awareness also involves emotional honesty. Most of us have been conditioned to suppress or ignore certain emotions, especially the so-called negative ones. Anger, jealousy, guilt, sadness, these are emotions we're taught to avoid or hide. But emotions are not wrong. They are messengers. They are energy moving through the body, trying to tell you something. When you deny or bypass them, you lose access to critical information. For example, anger often signals a boundary that's been crossed. Jealousy might reveal a desire you haven't owned. Guilt could point to a value you violated, or one that was never yours to begin with. Self-awareness means getting curious about these emotions instead of shaming them. It means asking, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Rather than rushing to get rid of it. And when you do that, emotions become allies, not enemies. They guide you back to your truth. Now, developing self-awareness is not a one-time event. It's a practice. And like any practice, it requires consistency. Start small. Create moments in your day where you pause and check in. When you're triggered, ask, what am I really feeling? When you're reacting, ask, what part of me feels threatened right now? When you're avoiding something, ask, what am I afraid to face? These questions don't need perfect answers. They just need honest ones. And over time, those answers will reveal patterns. Patterns you can work with, shift, or release. Journaling, mindfulness, somatic work, therapy. These are tools that can support you. But the most powerful tool of all is willingness. The willingness to look, to feel, to question, to listen. I want you to remember something vital. Self-awareness is not self-judgment. It's not about beating yourself up for what you find. It's about meeting yourself with compassion. Because you're not flawed, you're layered. You're not broken, you're becoming. The things you're discovering about yourself were once survival strategies. They served you, even if they no longer do. Self-awareness allows you to thank them for their service and then choose new strategies that serve the person you're becoming. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about knowing yourself. And the more you know yourself, the more aligned your life becomes. Not because it gets easier, but because it gets real. Chapter 4. Emotional Intelligence and Inner Balance. The Language of the Soul. You were never taught to speak. Let's be honest. Most of us were never taught how to feel. We were taught how to succeed, how to please, how to suppress, how to smile through discomfort and apologize for tears. We were rewarded for composure and punished for overreacting. We learned that being emotional meant being weak, irrational, or too much, so we got good at hiding. We tucked away our feelings, labeled them inconvenient, and trained ourselves to numb out, push forward, and pretend. But here's the truth. No one told us. Emotions are not the enemy. They are messengers. They are the purest signals from our internal world, guiding us toward what matters, what hurts, what needs healing, and what deserves honoring. Emotional intelligence is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally fluent, learning to understand, regulate, and express your inner world in a way that serves your growth rather than sabotages it. You see, emotions are not problems to be solved. They are signals to be acknowledged. Just like physical pain lets you know something in your body needs attention, emotional discomfort signals that something inside needs care. But if you were raised in an environment where emotions were ignored, dismissed, or weaponized, you likely developed unhealthy coping mechanisms. Maybe you became the peacekeeper, suppressing your feelings to avoid conflict. Maybe you became hyper-independent, believing no one could handle your truth. Maybe you turned your anger inward and called it shame, or numbed your sadness and called it strength. These adaptations helped you survive, but they also disconnected you from yourself. Emotional intelligence invites you to reconnect, not just intellectually, but somatically, spiritually, and relationally. It asks you to sit with what you feel without judgment and allow it to teach you instead of terrify you. But first, let's get clear on what emotional intelligence really means. Popularized by psychologist Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence, often called EQ, refers to the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and influence emotions, both your own and those of others. Unlike IQ, which measures cognitive ability, EQ measures emotional skill. It includes self-awareness, knowing what you're feeling, self-regulation, managing your emotional responses, motivation, using emotions to fuel rather than block progress, empathy, recognizing emotions in others, and social skills, navigating relationships with emotional awareness. People with high EQ are not emotionally perfect, they're emotionally present. They don't suppress or explode. They process, they pause, they respond instead of react. And that ability creates a ripple effect in every area of life, from how you lead and love, to how you parent, partner, and pursue your goals. Let's talk about emotional suppression for a moment, because most people don't realize how much it costs them. When you chronically ignore your emotions, you don't just lose touch with your inner world. You lose your capacity for connection, creativity, and clarity. Emotions don't disappear when you suppress them. They mutate. Suppressed anger becomes bitterness. Unfelt sadness becomes numbness. Ignored fear becomes anxiety. These repressed emotions build up like pressure in a bottle, and eventually, they find their way out through chronic stress, irritability, burnout, depression, or self-sabotage. Think about it. How many times have you snapped at someone over something small, only to realize later it wasn't about them at all? That's not a personality flaw. It's emotional buildup. And it's common because most of us never learned how to feel to heal. Emotional intelligence is the practice of releasing that pressure before it explodes, of tending to your inner world before it turns into outer chaos. A powerful tool for building emotional intelligence is the practice of naming your emotions accurately. This might sound simple, but it's one of the most transformative skills you can develop. Neuroscience shows that when we name what we feel, I feel overwhelmed, I feel disappointed, I feel unworthy, we reduce the emotional charge and increase our capacity to process it. Why? Because language activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning and reflection. This creates distance between you and the emotion, allowing you to engage with it rather than be consumed by it. Unfortunately, most people have a limited emotional vocabulary, usually defaulting to a handful of words like mad, sad, fine, or stressed. But emotions are nuanced. Expanding your emotional vocabulary is like upgrading from black and white to full color. It allows you to better understand what's really going on beneath the surface, and that understanding becomes the gateway to healing. Let me tell you about Julian. For most of his life, he described himself as angry. He'd say things like, "I have a temper," or "I just snap sometimes." But through therapy and journaling, he started to dig deeper. He realized that beneath the anger was a mix of betrayal, grief, and fear, feelings he'd been carrying since childhood when his father left and no one explained why. The anger had become a mask, protecting him from the more vulnerable emotions underneath. But once he named those deeper truths, something shifted. He stopped reacting and started reflecting. He learned to say, "I feel abandoned," or "I feel disrespected." And suddenly, his relationships improved, not because the anger vanished, but because he finally understood where it came from. This is emotional intelligence in action. It's the courage to look beneath the surface and speak the truth of what you find. Another pillar of emotional intelligence is regulation, not suppression, but intentional response. Emotional regulation doesn't mean you never feel triggered. It means you know how to respond when you are. It's the ability to pause between impulse and action, to breathe through the urge to lash out or shut down, to recognize when your nervous system is activated and offer it care instead of chaos. This requires self-awareness, yes, but also practice. Techniques like deep breathing, grounding exercises, or simply taking a mindful pause before responding can dramatically shift your emotional experience. It's not about being stoic or detached. It's about becoming the calm within your own storm, learning to soothe your internal state so you don't cause unnecessary damage externally. And then there's empathy, often misunderstood as just being nice or understanding. True empathy is the ability to feel with someone, to step into their emotional experience without losing your center. It's not about fixing or rescuing. It's about witnessing. Empathy connects us, disarms defensiveness, and builds trust. But here's the key. You can't offer genuine empathy to others if you haven't practiced it with yourself. That's why self-compassion is at the core of emotional intelligence. When you learn to hold space for your own emotions without judgment, when you can say, "It's okay that I feel this way," you build the inner resilience needed to do the same for others. You stop projecting your pain and start sharing your presence. Let's not forget the role of inner balance. While emotional intelligence helps you navigate the highs and lows, inner balance helps you stay grounded amid them. Inner balance is not about being unaffected. It's about being centered. It's the emotional steadiness that comes from knowing how to return to yourself when life pulls you off course. You cultivate it through rituals of self-connection, meditation, journaling, walking in nature, breath work, or simply taking intentional time to unplug and check in. These practices don't make emotions go away. They create a container for them. And in that container, you learn to feel deeply without losing yourself. Before we close this part of the chapter, I want to leave you with something practical. Over the next few days, become a gentle observer of your emotional world. Not a judge, not a fixer, just a witness. When a strong emotion arises, pause. Name it. Ask it what it needs. Reflect on where it might be coming from. Track how it shows up in your body. And notice how, when you stop fighting your emotions, they often soften. Emotions are like waves. They rise, peak, and fall. You don't have to be swept away by them. You can learn to ride them with grace. And the more you practice this, the more emotionally intelligent and emotionally free you become. Chapter 5. Healing Past Wounds and Rewriting Inner Narratives. The invisible scars that still speak for you. There are wounds we carry that no one can see. They don't bleed, they don't bruise, they don't require stitches or casts, but they ache in silence, tucked beneath layers of smiles and responsibilities, woven into the fabric of our behaviors, our beliefs, and our reactions. These are the emotional wounds from our past, moments when we were abandoned, misunderstood, invalidated, unloved, neglected, betrayed, or broken by someone we trusted. And while time may pass, these wounds often don't just go away. Instead, they calcify into narratives, stories we start telling ourselves about who we are, what we deserve, and how the world works. Stories like, I'm not enough. Love has to be earned. People always leave. If I show who I really am, I'll be rejected. These stories were never true to begin with, but when repeated enough times, they become gospel in the architecture of our identity. This chapter is about gently untangling those stories. It's about facing the past, not to relive it, but to release its hold on the present. Because until we heal what hurt us, we keep handing our lives over to the very things that broke us. The truth is, most of us are haunted by old scripts. Scripts we didn't write, but memorized by heart. They were handed to us in childhood, forged in moments when our nervous system recorded a pattern. When I cry, no one comes. When I express a need, it's too much. When I try to shine, I'm made to feel small. Our younger selves were not equipped to rationalize these moments. They were designed to survive them. So we developed adaptive strategies to keep us safe. We became perfectionists to earn approval, people pleasers to avoid rejection, overachievers to feel worthy, or emotionally numb to avoid pain. And these adaptations worked for a time. They got us through the storm. But now, as adults, those same strategies may be the very things holding us back. Healing means learning to see the difference. It means looking at our patterns with compassion instead of judgment. It means asking, where did I learn this? And does it still serve me? Let's be clear. Healing is not about blaming your parents or reliving trauma. It's about understanding. It's about connecting the dots between who you were, what you experienced, and who you've become. It's about creating space between the wound and the world so that you no longer act from the pain unconsciously. Because unhealed pain doesn't stay quiet. It finds its way into our relationships, our work, our self-talk. It shows up as defensiveness, avoidance, anxiety, overthinking, chronic guilt, or self-sabotage. And the heartbreaking part? We often think these are just parts of our personality when, in reality, they are coping mechanisms forged in pain. The good news is that what was learned can be unlearned, and that's what this chapter is here to help you do. To begin this work, you must start with safety. Your body will not let go of pain unless it feels safe enough to do so. That means creating an environment, internally and externally, where you are not constantly re-triggered or overwhelmed. Healing does not happen in chaos. It happens in stillness, in slowness, in honesty. It begins with the willingness to sit with your younger self and say, "I'm here now. I see you. I believe you." One powerful way to initiate this connection is through inner child work. This involves visualizing or dialoguing with your younger self, the version of you who first felt the hurt. You don't need to remember every detail. You just need to feel. Imagine that child sitting beside you. What do they need to hear? What were they denied? How can you offer that now? This practice may bring up deep emotion, and that's okay. Let it come. You're not falling apart. You're letting go of what was never meant to be carried so long. Another essential aspect of healing past wounds is identifying the limiting beliefs they created. This step requires radical honesty. What do you believe about yourself that keeps you small or stuck? Perhaps it's the belief that you're unlovable, unworthy, or incapable. These beliefs aren't facts. They're interpretations based on past experiences. But if left unchallenged, they shape your future as if they were truth. Begin to write them down. Literally. Name them. Then ask, where did I first learn this? And is this belief objectively true? Often, you'll find that these beliefs were conclusions drawn in childhood, based on moments when someone else's behavior made you feel inadequate. The irony is, it was never about you. It was about them, their limitations, their inability to love or see you. Yet you internalized it. Healing invites you to give that belief back. It's not yours. You can rewrite the story. And that's the power of narrative work. Our minds are meaning-making machines. When something painful happens, we instinctively try to explain it. But without a mature emotional framework, the stories we craft are often harsh, black and white, and deeply self-critical. Rewriting these narratives doesn't mean lying to ourselves. It means offering new interpretations that are kinder, wiser, and more compassionate. Instead of, "I was abandoned because I'm unworthy," we say, "I was abandoned because they were incapable of showing up, and I deserved better." Instead of, "I failed because I'm not good enough," we say, "I stumbled because I'm growing, and every failure is a lesson." This reauthoring process is not spiritual bypassing. It's spiritual reclamation. You take back the pen. You stop letting old pain write your present identity. Let me introduce you to Ava. She grew up with a critical mother who constantly compared her to others and never praised her efforts. For years, Ava believed that nothing she did was enough. She chased accolades, burned out in jobs, stayed in relationships where she overgave and underreceived. In therapy, she discovered that her core wound wasn't failure. It was invisibility. She had spent her entire life trying to be seen in ways her mother never allowed. Through journaling and somatic work, Ava began to speak directly to that wound. She wrote letters to her younger self, reminding her that she was worthy of love without performance. She practiced receiving compliments, kindness, rest, without guilt. And slowly, her nervous system began to trust safety again. Ava didn't become a different person. She just became more herself, no longer ruled by the ache of being unseen. Healing also involves grief. The grief of what was lost, what was never given, what should have happened but didn't. Many people avoid healing because they fear the grief that comes with it. But grief is not the enemy. It's the gateway. It's the way your body metabolizes loss and opens space for newness. Crying, mourning, feeling the sorrow, it doesn't make you weak. It makes you whole. There's a sacredness to grieving what your younger self endured. And in that grieving, you often find a strange sort of peace, because finally, someone is acknowledging it. Finally, someone is saying, "That wasn't okay. You didn't deserve that." That someone is you. It's important to mention that healing is not linear. You may feel like you've resolved something, only for it to resurface later. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means another layer is ready to be witnessed. Healing is cyclical, like peeling an onion. Each layer you release brings you closer to your core self. And with each cycle, you develop more tools, more awareness, more self-trust. You begin to recognize the triggers, not as threats, but as invitations. You stop running from the discomfort and start learning from it. That's the shift, from surviving your past to learning from it, from being defined by your pain to being refined through it. In this part of your journey, I encourage you to approach yourself with relentless compassion. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not too late. You are right on time. The pain you carry is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of your humanity and your willingness to face it, to feel it, to free yourself from it. That is the mark of courage, not weakness. You were never meant to heal in isolation. Let this chapter be a companion on your path, a gentle voice reminding you that you are not alone and you are more resilient than you know. Chapter 6: Rewiring Habits, the Psychology Behind Lasting Change. The truth about why we struggle to change and how that's not your fault. We've all been there. The excitement of a fresh start, the bold declarations we whisper to ourselves. This time will be different. The diet, the morning routine, the workout plan, the journaling habit, the nightly wind-down ritual. We dive in with the best of intentions. We plan, we prep, we believe, and then life happens. We oversleep, we miss a workout, we order takeout. The journal collects dust. Slowly, almost invisibly, our new habit dissolves into the background noise of all the other well-meant beginnings we couldn't quite sustain. And if you're like most people, what follows isn't just disappointment, it's shame. A voice inside whispers, "See? You can't stick to anything. You always mess it up." This inner critic isn't just cruel, it's misinformed. Because here's the truth they don't tell you loudly enough. Struggling to change your habits isn't a character flaw. It's biology. It's psychology. And once you understand how your brain actually builds and resists change, you stop blaming yourself and start working with yourself. That's what this chapter is about. Peeling back the layers on how habits are formed, broken, and transformed. Not from a place of shame, but from a place of understanding. Not through willpower, but through wisdom. Let's start by talking about how your brain is wired. At the core of every habit, good or bad, is a neural pathway. Think of these pathways like trails in a forest. The more often you walk a trail, the clearer it becomes. Your brain, ever efficient, prioritizes these well-worn paths because they require less energy. It automates behavior to save fuel. That's why you don't have to think about brushing your teeth or unlocking your phone. They're already programmed. The problem? This automation doesn't distinguish between helpful habits and harmful ones. If you've repeated something often enough, like scrolling when bored, snacking when stressed, or avoiding difficult conversations, your brain files that under default. So even when you want to change, your brain is still operating from its old blueprint. That's not laziness. That's a protective, energy-conserving system doing its job. And if we're going to rewire it, we need to start by honoring its design, not fighting it. One of the biggest myths in personal growth is that change comes from motivation, that you just need to want it enough. But neuroscience says otherwise. Motivation is fleeting. It's influenced by mood, environment, hormones, sleep. It spikes and crashes. Habits, on the other hand, are driven by consistency, not intensity. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, puts it simply: You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Real sustainable change comes from building a system that supports the new identity you're trying to embody. Not a grand sweeping overhaul, but tiny consistent shifts that your brain can repeat often enough to ingrain. But even before building new habits, we have to address the why behind them. Many of us try to adopt habits without understanding the emotional need they're tied to. Why do you want to wake up early? Why do you want to stop scrolling at night? What are you really trying to feel? Empowered? Peaceful? Loved? Seen? Habits are rarely about the behavior. They're about the emotional state that behavior promises. If we don't get clear on that, we set ourselves up to chase rituals without satisfaction. That's why journaling why you want to change, not just what you want to change, is essential. When you tap into emotional truth, your brain has a deeper reason to stay engaged. Let's also talk about triggers, those seemingly small cues that set an entire behavior loop into motion. According to behavior scientist B.J. Fogg, every habit is anchored to a trigger, followed by an action, and then a reward. Understanding your triggers is crucial because if you don't know what activates your old habits, you can't interrupt the pattern. Is it the 3 p.m. crash that leads to sugar? The loneliness at night that leads to social media? The overwhelm that leads to procrastination? Bring awareness to those moments. You don't have to fix them right away. But by observing them with curiosity, not judgment, you start to reclaim choice. That micro moment between trigger and action is where transformation lives. And here's where most habit change efforts go sideways. We try to change too much, too fast. The brain doesn't like drastic shifts. It perceives them as threats. So when you overhaul your diet, your schedule, your sleep, and your screen time all at once, your nervous system freaks out. You enter survival mode. And in survival mode, the brain defaults to familiarity, not growth. That's why lasting change often looks boring. It's built in small, almost unsexy increments. 1 glass of water, 1 minute of meditation, 1 page of a book. These aren't trivial acts. They're trust signals. Each small win tells your brain, hey, it's safe to try something new. Over time, these micro changes create macro results. Now let's explore the idea of identity-based change. This is the missing piece in most habit systems. Instead of focusing on what you want to do, focus on who you want to become. For example, instead of saying, I want to run 3 times a week, say, I'm becoming someone who values movement. This subtle shift rewires your self-image, which is the true engine behind sustained behavior. We act in alignment with who we believe we are. If you still believe you're bad at consistency, you'll subconsciously sabotage anything that proves otherwise. But if you start collecting evidence, small wins, consistent effort that supports a new identity, your habits stop being something you do and start becoming who you are. This is where self-compassion becomes a non-negotiable. You will slip. You will forget. You will miss days. That's not failure. It's part of the rewiring process. The old neural pathways are still there, waiting to be chosen again. But every time you return, you're strengthening the new ones. This is how you build resilience, not just habits. And resilience isn't about never falling. It's about how gently and quickly you return. The more compassion you show yourself, the safer your brain feels trying new things. Harshness shuts down progress. Kindness accelerates it. Let me tell you about Amir. He was a 38-year-old father who struggled with late-night binge eating. Every morning, he'd vow to be better. Every night, he found himself in the kitchen, half aware, half ashamed, eating until he was numb. Through coaching, Amir realized this habit wasn't about food. It was about comfort. It was the only time of day he felt like no one needed anything from him. Food was his escape. Once he named that, everything changed. He didn't start with cutting food. He started with adding comfort. 10 minutes to himself after work. A playlist that grounded him. A conversation with his younger self through journaling. The binging didn't disappear overnight, but the need for it slowly dissolved. Because the wound was seen, not silenced. That's what true habit transformation is about. Not forcing yourself into a better version, but gently tending to the unmet needs behind your behaviors. When those needs are met in healthier ways, the old habits begin to lose their grip. You begin to shift, not just what you do, but how you live. You become someone who listens to your body, who respects your limits, who creates rituals that nourish rather than punish. You stop chasing change and start inviting it. In this chapter, we'll go deeper into the science, the systems, and the soul of habit formation. You'll learn about dopamine loops, habit stacking, reward systems, and neural rewiring. But most importantly, you'll learn how to become your own ally in the process. Because you don't need another resolution. You need a relationship with yourself that makes change sustainable. One where failure is feedback, not final. One where your future self is not a fantasy, but a friend you're meeting with every small act of integrity. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming consistent. And consistency is born not from discipline alone, but from trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your process. Trust that every time you show up, no matter how small the effort, you're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. That's the psychology of lasting change, and it's available to you right now. Chapter 7. Emotional Mastery, Understanding and Transforming Inner Turmoil. The unspoken language of emotion, why you feel what you feel. It's 3 a.m. and your heart is racing. You're lying in bed, wide awake, playing over a conversation you had hours ago, dissecting every word, every pause, every facial expression. You feel a tightness in your chest, an ache in your stomach, and a nagging, irrational belief that something terrible is about to happen. You try to rationalize it, but the emotion has already hijacked your system. And in that moment, nothing else matters. Not logic, not the facts, not even how tired you are. What you're experiencing is not a moment of weakness or overreaction. It's emotion, raw, powerful, and very real. And for many of us, this invisible storm is a daily visitor, one we're taught to either suppress, ignore, or push through. But what if emotions aren't obstacles to overcome? What if they are messages, coded in sensation and memory, that, if decoded correctly, could become our most powerful tools for transformation? We grow up absorbing a lot of false stories about emotions. Boys are taught that crying is weakness. Girls are told they're too sensitive. In workplaces, we're expected to stay professional at all costs, even when we're breaking inside. Even in personal growth circles, there's this subtle pressure to be positive, to stay high vibe, to affirm our way out of pain. But here's what no one says loud enough. Emotions aren't the problem. Emotional suppression is. When we disconnect from how we feel, we don't become stronger. We become fragmented. We start living half-lives, smiling when we want to scream, saying we're fine when we're falling apart, keeping busy so we don't have to feel. This disconnection doesn't just erode our emotional health. It chips away at our authenticity, our relationships, our sense of inner peace. So, what exactly are emotions? At their core, emotions are signals, chemical and neurological responses to stimuli, internal or external. When you feel fear, your amygdala, a small almond-shaped part of the brain, lights up, triggering a cascade of responses designed to keep you safe. Your heart rate increases, your pupils dilate, your body mobilizes energy. Sadness, on the other hand, often invites stillness and withdrawal, a biological call to pause, process, and grieve. Anger, misunderstood as destructive, is often a protector, showing up to reassert boundaries that have been crossed. Each emotion has a purpose. Each one is a messenger, not a malfunction. When you stop labeling emotions as good or bad, you start to meet yourself with deeper compassion. You stop resisting the waves and begin learning how to surf. But emotional mastery doesn't mean being ruled by your feelings. It means learning their language. Imagine a friend who only speaks in metaphors. You'd need time and curiosity to understand them. Emotions are like that. They speak in sensations, patterns, memories. Anxiety, for example, might not just be fear of the future. It could be unprocessed grief from the past, an unmet need for control, or a sense of being chronically unseen. Until you're able to sit with that anxiety, name it, explore it, it will keep resurfacing in louder, more chaotic ways. Emotional mastery begins when we stop asking, "How do I make this go away?" and start asking, "What is this here to show me?" Let's talk about the difference between reacting and responding. Most people are emotionally reactive because they've never been taught how to pause. When a trigger hits, a sharp comment, a rejection, a setback, their nervous system fires into defense mode. They yell, they shut down, they spiral into shame. These aren't conscious choices. They're survival strategies developed over time, often in childhood, where we learned that expressing emotion might lead to rejection, punishment, or abandonment. So instead, we built defenses. Perfectionism to mask fear, humor to hide sadness, achievement to cover inadequacy. But those defenses don't disappear in adulthood. They follow us into boardrooms, bedrooms, friendships, and families. Emotional mastery means noticing these defenses without judgment. It means learning how to pause between trigger and response. That pause, however small, is where power lives. Let me introduce a simple but transformative framework. Name, normalize, navigate. When an emotion surfaces, the first step is to name it. Neuroscience tells us that naming an emotion, this is anger, this is shame, this is grief, activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for regulation and decision-making. It literally cools the emotional heat. Then normalize it. Remind yourself that this emotion is valid, not necessarily accurate in its story, but valid in its existence. Saying, "Of course I feel anxious before this big meeting," doesn't excuse the anxiety. It acknowledges it. Finally, navigate. Ask yourself, what does this emotion need from me right now? Sometimes the answer is expression. A journal, a walk, a conversation. Sometimes it's regulation, breathing, grounding, resting. Over time, this process becomes second nature. You stop being swept away by feelings and start navigating through them like a wise, steady captain. And here's something you need to know. You are not your emotions. You are the space that holds them. Think of your mind like the sky. Your emotions are the weather, temporary, shifting, sometimes stormy, sometimes calm. But no matter what passes through, the sky remains. You remain. This perspective helps you create emotional distance without emotional disconnection. You stop saying, "I am angry," and start saying, "I'm feeling anger." That small linguistic shift reminds you that your feelings are visitors, not residents. They don't define you, they inform you. And the more you practice this internal separation, the more inner stability you build. But emotional growth isn't a solo game. We are wired for connection, and healing often happens in relationship. That's why it's crucial to have safe spaces, whether that's therapy, support groups, trusted friends, or mentors, where you can bring your emotions into the light. When pain is witnessed with compassion, it begins to release its grip. Shame thrives in silence, but it cannot survive empathy. One of the bravest things you can do is let someone see the parts of you that still feel broken. Not so they can fix you, but so you can remember you're not alone. And in that shared humanity, healing begins. Let's also address the cultural stigma around negative emotions. So many people carry silent guilt for feeling sad, angry, jealous, or afraid, as if being spiritual or enlightened means being perpetually calm and joyful. But emotions aren't moral, they're informational. Anger might be alerting you to a boundary violation. Jealousy might be highlighting a buried desire. Sadness might be inviting you to slow down and let go. When you shame these emotions, you silence the intelligence behind them. Emotional maturity means making space for your full range without over-identifying with any one part. You are not a single emotion. You are the orchestra. In this chapter, we will explore the building blocks of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and emotional communication. But more than that, we'll learn how to integrate emotion into our everyday decisions, relationships, and self-concept. You'll understand the somatic experience of emotion, how it lives in the body, not just the mind. You'll discover tools for regulating your nervous system, reparenting your inner child, and creating rituals for emotional hygiene. Just like brushing your teeth or stretching your body, emotions require daily care. Not because you're broken, but because you're beautifully human. Let me tell you about Simone. She was a high-achieving lawyer who came into coaching because she felt numb. Nothing was technically wrong, but she couldn't shake the sense that something was missing. Through our work, we traced her emotional shutdown back to childhood, where expressing sadness was met with either dismissal or redirection. You're fine. Don't cry. Be strong. So she learned to power through. But that emotional armoring came at a cost: disconnection from joy, depth, intimacy. Together, we practiced emotional naming, body-based awareness, and inner dialogue. For the first time, she cried, not from weakness, but from release. And in that moment, she felt more alive than she had in years. Not because her emotions disappeared, but because she finally allowed them to move through her. You deserve that too. To feel fully, to live fully, to reclaim your right to feel without apology. Emotional mastery isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally free. Free to experience without judgment. Free to express without fear. Free to connect without masks. And that freedom? It begins the moment you stop fighting your emotions and start listening to them. Chapter 8: Identity and the Stories We Tell Ourselves. The mirror in the mind. Who are you, really? Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror, not a physical one, but the kind that reflects back something much deeper. Not your features, your age, your hairstyle, but your essence. You ask yourself, who am I? And without thinking too hard, a stream of thoughts bubbles up. I'm not confident. I'm not enough. I'm a helper. I'm a failure. I'm the strong one. I always mess things up. These aren't objective truths. They're stories. And every day you live your life not based on what's happening, but based on what you believe is happening. This chapter is about those stories. It's about identity, not the surface labels like job title or relationship status, but the deep-rooted beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of. And if you've ever felt stuck in a pattern you can't break, a role you can't escape, or a narrative you didn't consciously write, this is where your freedom begins. Most of us carry inherited identities. From a young age, we absorb what we're told, shown and made to feel, directly or indirectly. Maybe you were called the smart one, the quiet one, the troublemaker, the emotional one, the fixer. Maybe you were praised only when you achieved, or only noticed when you were in pain. Without realizing it, these experiences start to calcify into identity statements. I'm only worthy when I succeed. If I speak up, I'll be rejected. my needs don't matter. Over time, they become silent scripts running the show. We think we're making free choices, but in reality, we're playing roles we didn't audition for. We're not living life, we're performing identity. What makes this so tricky is that identity often hides in plain sight. We don't question our core beliefs because they feel like facts. It's not that you think you're broken, it's that you believe it's just who you are. You don't think you're unlovable. You believe love is something you have to earn. These aren't surface-level thoughts you can just replace with a positive affirmation. These are neural grooves carved by repetition, emotion, and survival. Identity is the story your nervous system memorized to help you make sense of the world. And that means rewriting it isn't just about thinking different. It's about healing, integrating, and consciously choosing who you want to be. Let's pause here and ask something big. What if who you think you are isn't actually you? What if it's a collage of fear-based protection mechanisms, cultural programming, parental conditioning, and outdated survival strategies? That's not to say you aren't responsible for your life. You are. But responsibility and self-blame are not the same thing. One empowers you to change, the other keeps you stuck. This chapter is about stepping into responsibility in a way that's infused with compassion. We're not here to shame the past or pretend the pain didn't happen. We're here to meet it with curiosity, to trace the roots of your identity stories, and to ask the most powerful question in transformation. Does this still serve me? Let's break this down. Identity can be thought of in layers. The outermost layer is what you show to the world. Your roles, labels, achievements. These are often shaped by society's expectations. Be successful, be attractive, be productive. The next layer is how you see yourself. Your self-concept, your self-esteem, your perceived strengths and flaws. Then, deeper still, is your internal narrative, the unconscious beliefs that govern everything else. People always leave. I have to be perfect. If I'm vulnerable, I'll get hurt. These inner stories don't just affect how you feel. They shape your behavior, your relationships, and even your reality. Your brain is a meaning-making machine. Once it locks onto a belief, it begins filtering the world to confirm it. This is called confirmation bias, and it's incredibly powerful. If you believe you're not lovable, you will subconsciously ignore the signs that you are. You'll push away intimacy. You'll sabotage opportunities. You'll choose relationships that mirror the belief. Not because you're broken, but because your identity is fighting to stay consistent. The story needs to survive. Let me share something personal. Years ago, I carried a quiet but persistent story that I had to earn my place in every room. I over-prepared, over-apologized, over-delivered. I didn't realize that beneath my drive for excellence was a core identity belief. I am only valuable if I'm useful. And while this made me seem impressive on the outside, it kept me exhausted, disconnected, and afraid to just be. The turning point wasn't when I achieved more. It was when I began challenging the belief itself. I had to ask, who taught me that my worth depends on performance? Is that belief true or just familiar? The work wasn't quick. It took sitting with the discomfort of doing less and still believing I was enough. It took reparenting the part of me that felt invisible unless I was fixing or performing. But slowly, something shifted. I didn't lose my drive. I just no longer used it to outrun unworthiness. That's the kind of change that lasts. Not a motivational high, but a foundational rewrite. Identity work isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Think back to your earliest memories, not the ones shaped by school or peers, but the ones where you felt most you. What were you drawn to? What made you feel alive, curious, open? These early imprints often hold the clues to your authentic self. As we grow, we build layers of protection, strategies to stay safe, liked, accepted. We become master shapeshifters. And while that adaptability is a strength, it can also leave us feeling unanchored. We wake up one day wondering why life feels off, why we feel like strangers to ourselves. It's not because we failed. It's because we've forgotten. Identity work is remembering, reclaiming, realigning. But here's the catch. Change threatens the ego. Even when our identity stories are painful, they're familiar. And the ego is addicted to the familiar. That's why growth often triggers resistance. You set a boundary and suddenly feel guilty. You speak your truth and immediately doubt yourself. You pursue a dream and feel an urge to sabotage. This isn't failure, it's feedback. It's your nervous system adjusting to a new identity. The old self is dying, and like any death, it brings grief. So be gentle. You are not just changing behavior, you are changing your sense of self. That takes time, patience, and support. Let's make this practical. One of the most powerful exercises you can do is a story audit. Write down the key identity beliefs you hold, especially the ones that feel limiting. Then ask, where did I learn this? Who benefits from me believing this? Is this belief rooted in love or fear? What new story do I want to live from? This isn't about blind positivity. It's about conscious authorship. You are not the victim of your narrative. You are the narrator. And that means you can revise the story. Not by pretending the old chapters didn't happen, but by choosing what the next ones will say. As we move through this chapter, we'll explore the science of self-concept, the psychology of belief, and the somatic imprint of identity. You'll learn how trauma shapes identity, how to use language to reframe your sense of self, and how to align your daily habits with your desired identity. We'll look at the gap between who you've been and who you're becoming, and how to bridge it without losing yourself. Because real transformation isn't about abandoning your past. It's about integrating it so powerfully that it no longer controls you. I want to end this part with a reminder. You are not stuck. You're just rehearsing an old role. And the script? It's editable. You don't have to wait for permission to change the story. You just have to believe that you are worth a new one. And let me say this, with all the certainty I can offer, you are. Chapter 9. Emotional Agility, Mastering the Flow of Inner Experience. Why emotional agility is more powerful than emotional control. There's a common idea out there that the people who thrive the most are the ones who stay calm, rise above their emotions, or don't let their feelings get in the way. You hear it in passing all the time. Don't be so emotional. You've got to toughen up. Just think positive. But here's the truth. No one says out loud, being told to suppress your emotions doesn't make you strong. It makes you disconnected. It makes you lose touch with a deep inner compass that was built into your body for a reason. Emotional agility is not about avoiding difficult emotions. It's not about stuffing them down or pretending you're fine when you're crumbling inside. It's about learning to move with your emotions, not against them. Like a skilled surfer who doesn't fight the wave, but reads it, rides it, and lets it guide the journey. That's what we're building here. Not stoicism in the face of pain, but flexibility in the face of complexity. Because life is complex, and emotional suppression isn't resilience, it's avoidance in disguise. So what is emotional agility really? At its core, it's the ability to navigate your inner world with clarity, curiosity, and compassion. It's knowing how to recognize your feelings, understand their roots, hold space for them without judgment, and respond intentionally rather than react automatically. This isn't some abstract concept. It's a skill set, one that can be learned, practiced, and refined. And the reason it's so powerful is because your emotions are not enemies to be silenced. They are messengers. They carry information. They reveal needs. They point to boundaries, values, wounds, and desires. When you shut them down, you lose access to your deepest intelligence. But when you learn to engage with them, honestly, openly, you begin to access a level of self-trust that cannot be shaken by external chaos. Let me be clear, emotional agility doesn't mean you feel happy all the time. In fact, it requires you to let go of the expectation that happiness is the goal. The truth is, emotions are not problems to be solved. They are experiences to be felt. When we stop treating sadness, anger, fear, or anxiety as indicators of failure, and instead start viewing them as part of being fully alive, something begins to shift. Suddenly, you're no longer afraid of your own inner weather. You know the storm will come, and you know you have the capacity to walk through it. You don't have to brace, shut down, or explode. You learn to breathe through it, to listen to it, to choose how to respond. That's emotional agility. It's not about control. It's about connection to yourself, to your truth, to what actually matters. Let's take a closer look at how this actually plays out in real life. Imagine you're feeling anxious before a big conversation. Maybe your stomach is tight, your chest heavy. If you've been trained, like most of us, to view anxiety as weakness, your first instinct might be to ignore it, rationalize it, or shame yourself for not being more confident. But emotional agility invites a different response. Instead of pushing it away, you pause, you notice, I feel anxious right now. You name it, not to label yourself, but to bring awareness. Then you get curious. What is this anxiety trying to tell me? Is it fear of rejection? A desire to be understood? A need for safety? Already, you're shifting from judgment to inquiry, from reflex to choice, and from that place you can decide, do I need to ground myself? Do I need support? Do I need to clarify my thoughts before I speak? Now you're responding with wisdom, not reacting from fear. That's the essence of this practice. You don't bypass the emotion. You work with it. You listen, learn, and move forward in alignment. Here's something else most people don't realize. The most damaging thing isn't the emotion itself. It's the resistance to the emotion. When you suppress anger, it doesn't go away. It festers. It leaks out in passive aggression, resentment, self-sabotage. When you avoid grief, it doesn't heal. It hardens into numbness or bitterness. And when you run from fear, it only grows louder in the background. Emotional agility isn't about fixing your feelings. It's about making space for them, letting them pass through you instead of trapping them inside you. This space, this capacity to feel without being overwhelmed, is what creates internal safety. And once you have that, you become unshakable. Not because life gets easier, but because you trust your ability to meet it. Moment by moment, emotion by emotion. So where do we start? The first step is awareness, learning to recognize your emotional landscape as it unfolds. This might sound simple, but in a world that constantly tells us to push through, numb out, or stay positive, awareness is radical. It requires slowing down, tuning in, and listening to the body. Emotions often show up as sensations long before they become conscious thoughts. A lump in the throat, a tight jaw, a rush of heat, a sinking belly. Your body is speaking. Can you hear it? The second step is naming, putting words to the feeling. Not just bad or fine, but specific language: disappointment, jealousy, longing, grief, hope. Research shows that naming emotions with precision increases emotional regulation. When you name it, you frame it. You bring it into the light where it can be understood, instead of letting it run your behavior from the shadows. After awareness and naming comes the most transformative part: curiosity. Instead of asking, how do I get rid of this feeling? Ask, what is this feeling here to teach me? Emotions are not random. They're signals. Anger often points to a violated boundary. Sadness signals loss or unmet needs. Anxiety might signal uncertainty, a lack of control, or unresolved fear. The more you understand the message, the less power the emotion has over you. You move from being in the emotion to being with it. This slight shift in relationship changes everything. You're no longer drowning. You're observing, engaging, learning. And this builds the final step, choice. You get to decide what happens next, not based on compulsion, but intention. Do I need to speak, rest, cry, set a limit, express myself? Emotional agility doesn't eliminate discomfort, but it gives you agency within it. And agency, more than anything else, is what makes us feel free. Let's talk briefly about why this matters so much for growth. You cannot evolve beyond the level of emotional maturity you've developed. You might gain knowledge, skills, or success, but if you haven't learned how to sit with your own discomfort, your growth will always hit a ceiling. You'll avoid the hard conversations. You'll back out of the opportunities that stretch you. You'll repeat the same patterns in relationships, business, and life, because underneath it all, you'll still be trying to avoid certain feelings. Real change requires emotional capacity. It asks, can you sit with discomfort long enough to choose differently? Can you hold space for uncertainty, vulnerability, or fear without defaulting to old habits? Can you stay open-hearted in the face of disappointment or rejection? These aren't easy questions, but answering them honestly is the path to true empowerment. One final truth. Emotional agility is not a linear journey. There will be days when you feel deeply connected to yourself, grounded and clear. And there will be days when you slip into old patterns, numb out, or get overwhelmed. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. The goal isn't perfection, it's practice. Every time you choose presence over avoidance, curiosity over judgment, self-compassion over self-criticism, you are rewriting your emotional blueprint. You are becoming safer inside yourself. And that, more than anything else, is what allows real change to take root. Chapter 10. The Power of Identity. Who you believe you are shapes everything. Identity is the invisible force guiding your every choice. There's a quiet power at work in your life that shapes how you think, act, respond, and even dream. It's not your intelligence, not your environment, not your willpower. It's something far more subtle, something so embedded in you that you rarely stop to question it. Your identity, the beliefs you hold about who you are, what you deserve, and what's possible for you, are not passive background noise. They are the invisible architects of your daily experience. If you believe you are someone who always messes up, your actions will unconsciously reinforce that. If you see yourself as resilient, you will rise again and again, no matter how many times life knocks you down. We don't act in alignment with who we want to be. We act in alignment with who we believe we are, and that distinction changes everything. This is why most transformation efforts fail. People try to change their behaviors, but not the beliefs that drive those behaviors. They try to adopt new habits, but keep the same old identity that says, I'm lazy, I'm broken, I'm not disciplined, I never follow through. And inevitably, the old identity wins. Because here's the truth. Your subconscious mind is wired to stay congruent with your self-image. When your actions contradict your identity, your brain will sabotage the actions to restore balance. That's why someone who loses weight, but still sees themselves as the overweight one, often regains it. Or why someone who starts a business while still believing, I'm not a leader, will unconsciously hold themselves back. The subconscious is always working to prove your self-perception right. That's not weakness, it's wiring. But the good news is, identity is not fixed. It can be examined, it can be reshaped, it can evolve. And when it does, every other area of your life shifts with it. Let's make this practical. Take a moment to think about a change you've been trying to make. Maybe it's waking up earlier, eating healthier, being more assertive, starting a creative project, or stepping into leadership. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I believe I need to be to do this consistently? And more importantly, do I currently see myself as that kind of person? If the answer is no, you're not lacking discipline. You're experiencing an identity gap. And until that gap is closed, you'll feel stuck. But once you begin to align your internal self-image with the change you want, you'll notice something almost magical. Resistance starts to dissolve. The habit isn't just something you're trying to do. It becomes an expression of who you are. That shift from effort to embodiment is the difference between temporary change and permanent transformation. Here's something most people miss. Your identity is not a truth. It's a story. A collection of beliefs you've picked up through experience, repetition, culture, and conditioning. Maybe you were told as a child that you were too sensitive, and now you see your empathy as a flaw rather than a gift. Maybe you failed once and internalized the idea that you're not capable. Maybe someone left and you decided you're not lovable. These beliefs get reinforced over time, becoming part of your narrative. But that narrative is not your destiny. It can be rewritten. The moment you realize that who you think you are is just a story, not a fact, you begin to reclaim your power. You begin to ask, what story have I been living in? And what story do I want to write next? Let's take a closer look at how identities are formed. Most often, they are built through three mechanisms: repetition, emotion, and labels. Repetition creates reinforcement. If you keep hearing or telling yourself that you're bad with money, can't stay focused, or aren't creative, those thoughts become grooves in the brain. The more you repeat them, the deeper they go. Emotion adds weight. An identity formed during a painful or impactful moment tends to carry more influence. If you were humiliated in school, for example, you might carry a not smart enough identity for years. And labels, especially those given by others, can stick hard. The quiet one, the troublemaker, the people pleaser. The mind clings to these as shortcuts to understanding itself. But shortcuts are not always accurate. They're often rooted in a single moment, rather than the full truth of who you are. And when we begin to question these inherited labels, we start to discover the real self that's been buried underneath. This is why identity work is some of the most courageous and rewarding work you will ever do. It requires you to question everything you thought was just the way I am. It asks you to hold up your beliefs and ask, is this actually true? Who gave me this belief? What evidence do I have for a different reality? And perhaps most importantly, who would I be without this story? These questions are not abstract. They are doorways to a new reality. Because once you shift how you see yourself, everything else changes. The risks you're willing to take, the standards you hold, the relationships you choose, the way you handle setbacks. Identity is the root. Everything else is fruit. One of the most helpful ways to begin shifting identity is through something called identity-based habits. This concept, popularized by behavior science and habit research, flips the usual formula. Instead of saying, I want to do this, you say, I want to become the kind of person who does this. For example, instead of, I want to write a book, you say, I'm becoming the kind of person who writes consistently. Instead of, I want to eat better, you say, I'm someone who respects my body through nourishing choices. This small linguistic change makes a big psychological difference. You're not just trying on a behavior, you're stepping into a new self-concept. And the more you reinforce that concept through small, consistent actions, the more it becomes real. Identity is not changed by willpower alone. It is changed through evidence, stacked day by day until the new story becomes undeniable. There's also a powerful emotional component to identity change: grief. As strange as it sounds, letting go of an old identity, even a painful one, can bring up sadness, resistance, or fear. That identity, however limiting, felt familiar. It kept you safe in certain ways. It shaped your world, and stepping away from it means stepping into uncertainty. That's why so many people unconsciously sabotage their growth. Not because they don't want to change, but because part of them is still grieving who they used to be. If that's you, I want you to know, it's okay to feel that grief. It's okay to honor the version of you that helped you survive. You don't have to shame that self to outgrow it. You can say, "Thank you," and still move forward. Growth doesn't mean disowning your past. It means integrating it, learning from it, and choosing differently now. As we move forward in this chapter, we're going to dive deeper into the architecture of identity. We'll explore how to identify limiting beliefs, how to reprogram your inner narrative, and how to build evidence for the version of you that's been waiting to emerge. But for now, I want to leave you with this. The most powerful change you can ever make is to shift the way you see yourself, not just on the surface, but at the core. Because when your identity evolves, your choices shift. Your behaviors align. Your environment adapts. Your life transforms. And that change isn't something you force. It's something you become. You are not your past. You are not your mistakes. You are not the story others told about you. You are a living, breathing work of art, capable of change, worthy of growth, and equipped with everything you need to become the next version of yourself. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you've always been. Beneath the fear, beneath the conditioning, beneath the self-doubt, the truth of you is not something you need to find. It's something you're returning to, step by step, layer by layer, moment by moment, and this is just the beginning. Chapter 11, The Emotional Mind, Understanding and Reclaiming Your Inner Landscape. Emotions aren't the enemy. They're the message we are, all of us, emotional creatures first and rational thinkers second, despite what the world might have led us to believe. Emotions are not weaknesses to be overcome or noise to be tuned out. They are signals, vital, intricate signals, designed to help us navigate life with meaning and depth. Every feeling you've ever had, from the soaring joy of unexpected kindness to the quiet ache of loneliness, is part of your internal compass. Yet we live in a world that often tells us to suppress those signals. Don't cry. Toughen up. Be positive. We're trained to perform emotional perfection while ignoring the truth pulsing inside us. And in that suppression, we lose connection to our most authentic selves. The first step to reclaiming your inner world is simple but revolutionary. Stop trying to control your emotions. Start listening to them, really listening, because emotions, when honored, become our greatest teachers. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed. Maybe you were anxious about a decision, angry at someone close, or silently swimming through sadness you couldn't explain. In that moment, did you pause to ask what that emotion was trying to reveal? Or did you push it down, distract yourself, try to move on before the feeling had a chance to finish speaking? Most of us are taught to treat emotions like obstacles, things that get in the way of logic or productivity. But emotions are not in the way. They are the way. Every emotion contains information. Fear often tells us where we feel vulnerable. Anger shows us where our boundaries are being violated. Sadness points to what we value and may have lost. Joy reveals what truly matters. But to access that information, we have to stop labeling emotions as good or bad. No emotion is inherently negative. It is our relationship to the feeling, our resistance to it, that causes pain. Let's take a closer look at the emotional brain itself. Deep inside the limbic system, the part of your brain responsible for processing emotion. Your amygdala scans the environment constantly, looking for signs of danger or reward. It responds faster than your rational mind. This means that your emotional reactions often arrive before your thoughts do. That's why you might feel a rush of anxiety or shame even before you can explain why. The brain is wired to prioritize emotion because evolutionarily, emotions kept us alive. Fear helped us avoid predators. Anger helped us fight for survival. Love helped us form bonds that protected us. These ancient mechanisms still operate in the modern world, even if the dangers are now social, emotional, or psychological, rather than physical. Understanding this helps us take our emotional responses less personally. You're not broken for feeling deeply. You're beautifully human. But there's something even more important to understand about emotional wiring. Your brain doesn't just respond to the outside world. It responds to the story you tell about the world. That story is often rooted in your past. For example, if you were criticized as a child for speaking up, your adult brain might associate assertiveness with danger. So now, every time you try to express yourself, you feel an inexplicable wave of anxiety. It's not because there's real danger in the present moment. It's because your emotional mind is still reacting to old programming. This is why emotional healing is less about getting over the past and more about updating your internal story. You have to show your nervous system that the present is safe, that who you are now can hold space for the pain you felt then. This is where self-awareness becomes powerful, because the moment you can witness your emotional patterns without judgment, you begin to change them. One of the greatest myths in personal development is that emotional mastery means not feeling or staying calm all the time. That's not mastery, that's suppression. True emotional mastery is the ability to feel fully without being consumed. It's the capacity to sit with discomfort, trace it back to its roots, and respond with care rather than reactivity. That kind of mastery begins with curiosity. Next time a difficult emotion rises, shame, rage, jealousy, grief, don't push it away. Ask it what it needs. Ask what it's trying to protect. Emotions are not here to punish you. They are here to guide you. And more often than not, they are asking for something simple: to be seen, heard, and integrated. The moment you stop fighting your emotions and start forming a relationship with them, your inner landscape begins to shift. You move from chaos to clarity, from confusion to coherence. Let's break down what that relationship can look like, practically speaking. First, you need to create space for emotional presence. That means moments in your day where you're not distracting yourself, numbing out, or staying hyper busy to avoid what you feel. This might look like a quiet morning ritual, a journal check-in, a walk without your phone, whatever allows you to hear yourself. In those moments, tune in. Ask, what's alive in me right now? Don't try to fix it. Just name it. I feel overwhelmed. I feel disconnected. I feel quietly hopeful. Naming the emotion is a powerful act. Neuroscience shows that labeling a feeling reduces the intensity of the emotion in the brain. This process, sometimes called affect labeling, helps shift activity from the emotional centers to the logical ones. In short, naming your feelings helps you move through them rather than be ruled by them. But emotional fluency isn't just about self-awareness. It's about emotional responsibility. That means learning to hold your emotions without making them someone else's problem. It's the difference between owning your anger and projecting it, between sharing your sadness and manipulating with it. Emotional responsibility is the foundation of emotional trust. When you learn to sit with your feelings and express them in a grounded, non-blaming way, your relationships change. People begin to feel safer with you. You begin to feel safer with yourself. And this creates space for deeper connection, both inwardly and outwardly. It's not that the emotions go away. It's that they no longer control you. You move from emotional reactivity to emotional agency. There's something else we need to talk about here: emotional layering. Often, the emotion we think we're feeling is just the top layer. Underneath anger, there may be hurt. Beneath hurt, fear. Beneath fear, a longing for connection. If you don't slow down enough to unpack these layers, you'll keep reacting to the surface while missing the root. That's why deep emotional work often involves slowing down, sitting with a feeling long enough to ask, what else is here? This is not easy. It requires patience, gentleness, and often support. But the insights that emerge from this kind of inquiry are life-changing. You begin to see patterns, old wounds replaying themselves in new situations. And once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. You can choose a new response. That's what healing is. Not erasing the past, but responding to the present from a place of awareness, not autopilot. Let's pause and acknowledge something important. Doing this work takes immense courage. To face your inner world with honesty is one of the bravest acts you can undertake. It means admitting that you're carrying things you didn't choose, that some of your coping mechanisms were once survival strategies, that parts of you are still hurting. But here's the good news. The very fact that you are willing to look inward means healing is already underway. The willingness to feel is the beginning of freedom. So if you're here, reading this, taking these words to heart, know this: you are already doing the work. You are already on the path. In the parts to come, we'll dive deeper into emotional intelligence, exploring tools for regulation, inner child healing, boundary work, and how to create emotional safety, both internally and in relationships. But for now, let this be your first invitation to see your emotions not as problems to be solved, but as guides to be honored. There is wisdom in your sadness. There is strength in your anger. There is truth in your fear. And when you learn to hold those emotions with tenderness and presence, you reclaim a part of yourself that's been waiting, sometimes for years, to be heard. This is where true growth begins, not in denying your emotions, but in learning their language, in welcoming them like old friends who have something important to say. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to start listening. Chapter 12. The Identity Shift, Becoming Who You're Meant to Be. You are not who you were told you were. There comes a moment in every life when the reflection in the mirror no longer matches the identity you've been carrying. It might hit you softly, like a quiet unease in the pit of your stomach when you repeat an old pattern you know no longer serves you. Or it might come crashing through, like a moment of heartbreak, failure, or radical awakening that shakes everything loose. Either way, that moment is sacred. It's not a sign that you're lost. It's a sign that you're beginning to remember who you really are underneath the scripts, roles, and expectations you've unconsciously inherited. The truth is, most of us never chose our original identity. It was handed to us. As children, we absorb the narratives, labels, and emotional atmospheres of the environments we grow up in. You're shy. You're difficult. You're the smart one. You're too sensitive. And without realizing it, we internalize those labels as facts. They become the scaffolding of how we see ourselves in the world. But here's the liberating truth. Identity is not fixed, it's fluid. And once you become conscious of the story you're living, you can rewrite it. Let's begin at the beginning. Because identity isn't just a list of adjectives or personality traits. It's a collection of beliefs, reinforced by experiences, that define what we think is possible for us. And those beliefs often run beneath our awareness. You might believe, for instance, that you're not the kind of person who takes risks, or that success is for other people, or that you have to work yourself into the ground to be worthy. These aren't just thoughts, they're identity-level beliefs. They influence everything from the goals you set, to the way you respond to feedback, to the kinds of relationships you allow yourself to have. What's more, the brain has a powerful tendency toward confirmation bias. That means it looks for evidence to support the identity you already believe in. If you believe you're bad with money, for example, your brain will unconsciously interpret financial mistakes as proof. And this creates a loop. Belief becomes behavior, becomes reality, becomes reinforcement. Unless something or someone interrupts the loop. And that interruption can be you. In fact, it has to be you. The first step in the identity shift is becoming the observer of your own self-concept. That means beginning to notice the stories you're telling yourself on autopilot, not with judgment, with curiosity. When you catch yourself saying, "I'm just not disciplined," pause and ask, "Where did I learn that? Whose voice is that? Is it true?" You'll be surprised at how many parts of your identity were never really yours to begin with. Maybe your father was highly critical, and now you see yourself through the lens of never enough. Maybe your early school years were full of comparison, and now your self-worth is hooked to external achievement. These imprints are powerful, but they're not permanent. Once you see them clearly, you can begin to disentangle from them. You can begin to choose a new foundation. But it begins with awareness. Always awareness. Let's dig a little deeper into why the brain clings so tightly to identity, even when it causes us pain. From a neurological standpoint, the brain is always trying to create safety, and nothing feels safer to the brain than predictability. That means your brain would rather stay in a familiar identity, even one that limits you, than venture into the unknown. It doesn't matter if the old identity is based in fear or scarcity or shame. If it's familiar, it feels safe. This is why real change often triggers resistance. You might consciously want to grow, but your subconscious identity is still anchored to the old version of you. That's not self-sabotage. That's survival programming. But once you understand this mechanism, you can work with it. You can begin to make safety in the new identity. That means repeating new beliefs, taking aligned actions, and slowly showing your nervous system that it's safe to become someone new. One of the most powerful tools for this process is a concept I call identity visualization. Unlike generic visualization, which often focuses on outcomes, the car, the job, the success, identity visualization focuses on embodiment. It asks, who is the version of me that already lives the life I want? What does she believe about herself? How does he treat his body, his time, his relationships? What kind of thoughts does she entertain? How does he respond to challenges? This is not about faking or forcing. It's about rehearsing. Because the brain doesn't distinguish much between real and imagined experience. When you repeatedly visualize yourself being the future version of you, not just having what you want, but being who you need to become to have it, you start to rewire the neural pathways associated with that identity. And slowly, your outer life starts to catch up to your inner rehearsal. Now, here's something most people don't talk about. Becoming a new version of yourself often involves grieving the old one. That's right, grief. Because even if your old identity was painful, it was familiar. It might have helped you survive. Maybe it protected you from rejection by keeping you small. Maybe it earned love through perfectionism. Maybe it created control in a chaotic world. And when you begin to let go of that identity, part of you will feel unmoored. That's normal. That's sacred. Grieve it. Honor it. Say thank you. And then gently release it. You are not abandoning who you were. You are evolving beyond it. You are allowed to outgrow your coping mechanisms. You're allowed to outgrow your old labels. You're allowed to become more than what others expected of you. Let's talk now about micro-alignments, tiny, consistent shifts that create massive identity change over time. Most people try to change their lives by changing their behavior directly. I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m., work out every day, meditate, and eat clean. But if those behaviors don't match your underlying identity, if you still see yourself as someone who lacks discipline, they won't stick. Instead, the most sustainable transformation happens when you align your actions with your new identity, not the other way around. That means starting small. If your new identity is, I am someone who respects my body, maybe your first micro-alignment is drinking a glass of water every morning. If your new identity is, I am someone who speaks my truth, maybe your first micro-alignment is sending one honest message today. These small actions signal to your brain, this is who I am now. And when repeated, they become part of your self-concept. Over time, identity drives behavior, not through force, but through congruence. And here's the most beautiful part. When you shift your identity, you don't just change your life. You give others permission to do the same. Human beings are wired for resonance. When you embody a new level of truth, wholeness, and alignment, the people around you feel it. Your courage to break out of old stories creates space for others to question theirs. Your willingness to live authentically becomes a mirror of possibility. This is not about being perfect. It's about being real. Real with your process, real with your struggles, real with your desire to become more. Because the world doesn't need more polished performances. It needs more people who are living from the inside out. So, here's where we begin. Not with goals or strategies or productivity hacks. We begin with a question that will follow us through the rest of this chapter and perhaps through the rest of your life. Who are you becoming? Not who were you told to be, not who you've always been, not who others expect, but you, the version that your soul keeps whispering about in quiet moments, the version that feels truer, freer, fuller, the version you haven't fully met yet, but you're beginning to sense. That version of you is not a fantasy, it's a memory of your future, and the shift begins now. Chapter 13, Embracing Vulnerability, the Courage to be Seen. The armor we wear, the truth we hide. If you're reading this and you've ever felt the pressure to keep it together, to put on a smile when your world is falling apart, to pretend you're fine when you're not, then you already know what it means to live behind emotional armor. Maybe your armor was built out of necessity. Maybe life didn't offer you safe spaces to fall apart, to be held without judgment, to show your messiness without fear of rejection. And so, over time, you learned to perform strength, to package your pain in silence, to filter your truth so you wouldn't make others uncomfortable. That armor probably served you. It got you through hard seasons. It helped you survive. But now you're being called to do more than survive. You're being called to live. And to truly live, to connect, to love, to create, to grow, you have to be seen. Not the polished version of you, the real you. And that starts with vulnerability. Vulnerability at its core is the willingness to be emotionally exposed. It means saying, this is who I am, without knowing how the world will respond. It means showing up without a guaranteed outcome. It's the trembling hand that reaches out first, the quiet confession of fear or longing, the brave, imperfect truth. And it's terrifying, because to be vulnerable is to risk being hurt. That fear is ancient. Our brains are wired to associate vulnerability with danger, because in our evolutionary past, being rejected by the group could literally mean death. So now, even in the modern world, where rejection doesn't threaten our survival, it can still feel like it does. That's why many of us would rather numb our emotions, control our image, or disappear into perfectionism than risk the raw, unfiltered exposure of vulnerability. But here's the paradox. The thing we most crave, true connection, can only happen through the very vulnerability we're afraid of. Think about the moments in your life when you felt closest to another human being. Chances are, those weren't the moments when everything was perfect. They were probably the moments when you or someone else let the mask drop. When someone said, "I'm scared," or "I don't know what I'm doing," or "I need help." Those moments don't push us apart, they pull us together. Why? Because they remind us we're not alone. We recognize ourselves in each other's imperfections. We feel less isolated in our own. And in that recognition, healing happens. Not just emotionally, but physiologically. Research shows that vulnerability builds trust, releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and even lowers cortisol levels. It's not just spiritual, it's biological. We are literally wired to connect through authenticity. And yet, we resist it, because it asks so much of us. To understand vulnerability, we have to understand the stories we tell ourselves about what it means to be strong. Most of us grew up with distorted definitions of strength. We were told that strength looks like never crying, never needing, never breaking. We were told that strength is stoicism, silence, independence at all costs. But that version of strength is brittle. It breaks under pressure. True strength is supple. It bends. It allows emotion to move through. It makes room for softness. And the truth is, it takes far more courage to say, "I'm struggling," than it does to pretend everything's fine. Pretending is easy. Honesty is hard. But it's also liberating. When you stop performing for approval, you free yourself to be loved for who you actually are, not who you're pretending to be. And that, right there, is what we're all really longing for. So how do we begin? How do we move from guardedness to openness, from curated image to authentic self? It starts with self-compassion. You cannot offer vulnerability to the world if you are cruel to yourself. Because if your internal world is full of judgment, you're too much, you're not enough, you should be past this. Then you'll never feel safe enough to be seen. Self-compassion creates the foundation. It sounds like this. It's okay to feel this. It makes sense that this is hard. You're allowed to not have it all figured out. These aren't fluffy affirmations. They're survival tools. They're the emotional scaffolding that lets you lower your guard. The more gentle you are with yourself, the more courageous you can be with others. Vulnerability doesn't start in a conversation. It starts in the relationship you have with your own heart. Now, it's important to say this clearly. Vulnerability is not oversharing. It's not dumping your pain on people who haven't earned your trust. It's not bleeding on those who didn't cut you. Vulnerability is a discerned risk. It's rooted in emotional maturity. You don't have to tell everyone everything. You have the right to protect your privacy. What you're being invited into isn't exposure. It's honesty. It's the willingness to stop pretending, to stop hiding your humanity in order to be palatable. Vulnerability is saying, "Here's what's real for me," even if your voice shakes, especially if it shakes. It's the quiet rebellion against a world obsessed with image. It's the slow, sacred return to truth. Let's explore what vulnerability looks like in everyday life, because it's not always a dramatic heart-to-heart or a tearful breakdown. Sometimes, vulnerability is simply asking for help when you're overwhelmed. It's telling a friend, "I'm not okay." It's saying, "I love you" first. It's admitting you don't know what you're doing. It's apologizing sincerely. It's showing your art, your writing, your voice, knowing not everyone will like it. It's telling the truth in a relationship instead of saying what's expected. It's showing up to therapy. It's crying in front of someone. It's sharing your dreams. Vulnerability isn't rare. It's everywhere. But we only notice it when we stop running from discomfort. And discomfort will come. Vulnerability doesn't guarantee connection. Sometimes it will be met with misunderstanding, dismissal, or even rejection. That's painful. But here's the thing. You cannot control other people's responses. You can only control your willingness to show up with integrity. And every time you do, even if it's met with silence or judgment, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. You build self-trust. You send the message to your own heart. I'm not abandoning you. That matters, because the goal isn't to be accepted by everyone. The goal is to live in alignment with your truth. When you do that, rejection stops feeling like annihilation. It just becomes redirection. One of the greatest barriers to vulnerability is shame. Shame tells us we're unworthy of love. It says, if people really saw this part of you, they'd leave. Shame thrives in secrecy, but the moment we speak it, it loses power. That's why vulnerability is the antidote to shame. When you say out loud, I feel not good enough, and someone meets you with compassion, your brain rewires. It learns, this part of me is still lovable. That's revolutionary. Not just for your mental health, but for your identity. You stop seeing yourself as broken. You start seeing yourself as human. So here's the invitation for this week. Notice your armor. Where do you feel the need to hide, to edit, to perform? What parts of yourself do you only share when you feel safe? Then ask, what would it look like to bring 5% more truth into those spaces? Not 100%, just 5%. That might look like saying, I'm having a tough day instead of, I'm fine. Or sharing your idea in a meeting, even if it's not perfect. Or telling your partner, I feel disconnected lately. Vulnerability doesn't have to be big to be brave. Every drop matters. Every drop counts. The truth is, most of us are walking around with the same fears of not being enough, of being too much, of being unlovable. And yet, we cover those fears with 1,000 masks, thinking that will protect us. But the masks keep us lonely. They keep us disconnected. When you take yours off, just a little, you make it safer for others to take theirs off too. That's how we change the world. Not through perfection, but through presence. Not through performance, but through truth. You were never meant to carry your pain alone. You were never meant to harden in order to survive. There is a softness in you that is sacred, a tenderness that is not weakness, but wisdom. The more you honor it, the more whole you become. And in that wholeness, you find a kind of freedom that can never be taken away. Chapter 14, Creating a Life of Meaning, Defining What Truly Matters. The quiet ache for more. There's a strange moment that often arrives in the midst of growth, and it doesn't look the way most people expect. You've been doing the work, healing old wounds, setting boundaries, creating habits, stepping into courage. And by all external measures, you're doing better than ever. And yet, something still feels hollow. You sit in your newly organized, peaceful home, journaling your gratitude list, repeating your affirmations, doing everything right, and still, a quiet ache lingers beneath the surface. It's subtle, but unmistakable. A low, persistent whisper. Is this all there is? You try to push it away. You tell yourself you should be happy. You've come so far. But the ache remains, and if you're honest, it's not a sign that something's gone wrong. It's a sign you're ready to go deeper. You're no longer just seeking survival. You're seeking meaning, and that changes everything. Meaning is not the same as happiness. Happiness is an emotional state, temporary, sometimes fleeting, sometimes strong, but always shifting. Meaning, on the other hand, is a deep-rooted sense of alignment. It's the experience of living in integrity with your values. It's knowing that your life, however ordinary or imperfect, matters, that it touches others, that it reflects something honest. And yet, most of us spend years chasing happiness while neglecting meaning. We follow formulas: get the job, get the house, get the body, get the relationship, hoping that eventually the emptiness will disappear. But formulas don't feed the soul. Meaning does. And meaning, unlike happiness, doesn't always feel good. In fact, it often asks us to do hard things, to say no when it would be easier to say yes, to walk away from comfort, to face the truth, to serve others, to grow past the limits of our ego. But what it gives us in return is irreplaceable. A life we can stand behind. A life we're proud of, even when it's hard. To begin creating a life of meaning, we have to start by getting brutally honest about where we've borrowed our definitions of success. Most people are walking around carrying someone else's version of what a meaningful life looks like. Maybe you inherited it from your parents, who taught you that security was the ultimate goal, or from culture, which told you that achievement equals worth, or from social media, which sells a curated dream in perfectly filtered photos. And maybe that dream isn't wrong, it just isn't yours. The first step to meanings is deconstruction. You have to be willing to question everything you've been taught, not with cynicism, but with curiosity. What if the life you're building is beautiful, but not your life? What if you're climbing a ladder that's leaned against the wrong wall? These questions are uncomfortable, but they're also liberating. They give you permission to redefine everything. So what does a meaningful life look like for you? That's not a question you can answer in 5 minutes. It's a lived inquiry. It requires listening. It requires stillness. Most of us are so caught up in doing that, we've forgotten how to listen. We don't pause long enough to ask ourselves what truly matters, let alone answer it. So start by carving out space. Quiet mornings, long walks, time in nature, moments of solitude, and simply ask, what do I value most in this world? Not what you should value, not what looks good on a resume. What moves you? What breaks your heart open? What makes you feel connected to something larger than yourself? For some, it's creativity. For others, it's service. For others still, it's family, learning, truth, beauty, adventure, community, freedom, spirituality. There is no right answer, only your answer. Meaning is found at the intersection of your deepest values and your everyday life. It's not something you discover in a mountaintop revelation. It's something you build, choice by choice, moment by moment. It's infused in how you treat people, in how you spend your time, in what you say yes to, and what you walk away from. And the biggest barrier to meaning? Distraction. The world is full of noise, full of messages pulling you away from your center. You'll be told to hustle more, do more, be more. But the meaningful life often asks the opposite. It asks you to slow down, to be present, to say no, to let go of things that don't align even if they look good from the outside. That's the paradox of growth. The more intentional you become, the more you'll disappoint others, and the more at peace you'll feel within yourself. Of course, creating a life of meaning is not a one-time decision. It's a lifelong practice. You'll be tempted again and again to drift, to conform, to numb, and you'll have to return again and again to your values, to your why. That's why rituals matter. Reflection matters. Checking in with yourself matters. Because the moment you stop asking, does this still feel true? Is the moment you start living on autopilot. Meaning requires maintenance. It asks for your attention. But it's worth every bit of effort because it gives you something no achievement ever can. A sense of internal alignment. A feeling of rightness even in chaos. A quiet knowing that you're living in accordance with your soul. It's also worth saying that a meaningful life doesn't have to be flashy. In fact, some of the most meaningful lives are also the most ordinary. They're not lived on stages or in spotlights. They're lived in kitchens, in classrooms, in forests, in quiet acts of kindness. They're built in the way you care for your child, the way you listen to a friend, the way you keep showing up when it's hard. The ego wants significance. The soul wants meaning. Don't confuse the two. You don't need to be extraordinary to live a meaningful life. You just need to be real, to be present, to be aligned. That's enough. That's more than enough. If you're struggling to find meaning, it might be because you're disconnected from your story. Sometimes we can't access purpose because we haven't fully processed our past. We're still carrying shame, regret, grief, or guilt. We're stuck in loops of I should've or if only. But here's the truth. Your pain is part of your path. Your mistakes, your heartbreaks, your detours, they're not detours at all. They're part of what gives your life texture, empathy, wisdom. Meaning doesn't come from perfection. It comes from redemption. It comes from taking what you've lived through and using it to help, to heal, to create, to connect. You don't need to erase your past to find purpose. You need to integrate it. That's what wholeness is. Not a spotless story, but an honest one. There's one more piece we have to name here, and it's this. Meaning is deeply connected to contribution. Human beings are wired for impact. We want to matter, not just to ourselves, but to others. That doesn't mean you have to become a martyr or burn yourself out in service, but it does mean that part of your fulfillment will come from giving, from using your gifts to make the world a little better. Maybe that means mentoring someone. Maybe it means building something. Maybe it means raising a child, starting a business, writing a book, planting a garden, being a safe space for others. The how doesn't matter. The heart behind it does. When you align your life with something greater than yourself, your days stop feeling empty. They start feeling sacred. So here's the first step. Pause. Before you keep chasing the next goal, take a moment to ask, is this aligned with what matters most to me? If the answer is yes, keep going. If it's not, get curious. Don't judge yourself. Just explore. What would it look like to choose differently, even in small ways? What would it feel like to come home to your own values, your own rhythm, your own truth? Because that's what this is really about. Not just changing your mind, but shifting your entire orientation from outside in to inside out, from achievement to alignment, from survival to meaning, from noise to depth. Chapter 15, Becoming the Author of Your Life, Living from the Inside Out, Waking Up from the Script. There comes a moment in every journey of transformation where we begin to see, clearly and maybe for the first time, that we've been living by a script we didn't write. We've been acting out lines handed to us by other people, parents, teachers, partners, society. Some of those lines were meant to protect us. Others were rooted in fear, shame, control. Many were passed down unconsciously, generation after generation. And though we've tried to make the most of the role, tried to improvise and adapt, something never quite fit. Something inside us has always felt slightly off script, like we were born for a different story, one that hasn't been written yet, one that is waiting for our voice, our choices, our truth. This is the chapter where we claim that authorship, where we begin, truly and courageously, to write a life that reflects who we are, not who we've been told to be. It's a radical act, this waking up, because it means questioning everything you've taken as given. It means looking at your life, not with blame, but with honesty, and asking, where did this belief come from? Who taught me to think this way about myself? When did I first learn that I had to shrink to be loved, or strive to be worthy, or stay silent to be safe? These aren't easy questions. They're not meant to shame you. They're meant to free you. Because when we don't ask them, we live on autopilot. We become characters in someone else's story. But when we do ask them, when we bring light to the unconscious scripts, we begin to reclaim our power. The truth is, no matter how long you've lived by default, you can begin at any moment to live by design. And the first step is awareness. Start with the stories. Every one of us carries a collection of core stories about who we are, what's possible, and what we deserve. These stories shape everything: our relationships, our careers, our inner dialogue. They often begin in childhood, in moments of pain or praise, and solidify over time. Maybe your story was, "I'm the responsible one," so you became the caretaker, the overachiever, the one who holds it all together. Or maybe it was, "I'm not good enough," so you kept chasing approval, chasing perfection, never feeling like you quite arrived. These stories aren't facts, they're interpretations. And if you can write a story, you can rewrite one. You are not bound by the narratives of your past. You are the editor. You get to decide what stays and what goes. But you have to see them clearly first. A powerful practice here is to sit down with a blank page and write, without filtering, the story you believe about your life. Not the story you tell others, but the one you tell yourself in the quiet moments. The one that plays in the background when you're alone. Write it all out. Your beliefs about love, success, failure, identity, purpose. Then ask yourself, who wrote this? Whose voice is this? Is it my own, or does it belong to someone I was trying to please, impress, or survive? And finally, is it still true? Does this story serve the life I want to live? That last question is everything. Because some stories, while once protective, have become prisons. And part of growing is outgrowing. It's important to understand that authorship doesn't mean control. Life will still throw curveballs. There will still be pain, loss, uncertainty. But authorship means you get to decide what those things mean. You get to choose the lens. You get to determine how you will respond, what you will make of your experiences, what you will carry forward, and what you will leave behind. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and brilliant psychiatrist, wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." That is the heart of authorship. Not the power to avoid pain, but the power to interpret it in a way that honors your values, your strength, your growth. The more you step into authorship, the more you realize that your life doesn't have to be impressive to be meaningful. It doesn't have to match anyone else's timeline or aesthetics. It just has to be yours. Authorship is about congruence, about integrity, about making choices that are aligned, not with who you were told to be, but with who you are becoming. And sometimes that means choosing paths that others don't understand, saying no to things that look good but feel hollow, saying yes to things that scare you but feel true. It's not about getting it perfect, it's about getting it honest, and that takes practice. One of the most common barriers to authorship is fear, specifically the fear of disappointing others. We're social beings. We're wired for belonging. And for many of us, the idea of stepping outside the expected story feels like a betrayal of family, of culture, of identity. But here's what's true. Every time you abandon yourself to please others, you deepen your own self-betrayal. And every time you honor your truth, even in small ways, you build trust with yourself. That trust is the foundation of authorship. You cannot write your life with confidence if you're constantly editing yourself for approval. The cost is too high. Approval is temporary. Alignment is sustainable. To begin living as the author of your life, you must also become a student of your inner world. Learn your patterns. Notice your triggers. Listen to your intuition. When something feels off, don't dismiss it. Explore it. When something lights you up, don't downplay it. Follow it. You are constantly being guided, but most of us have been trained to ignore the signals. We override our instincts with logic, with fear, with shoulds. But authorship is about reclaiming your inner authority. It's about letting your values, not your fear, be the compass. Letting your truth, not your conditioning, be the guide. And remember, your story doesn't have to be dramatic to be powerful. It just has to be real. Some people think they need a big transformation to feel worthy of a new story. They think they need to burn everything down, quit their job, move to another country, start over completely. And sometimes, sure, that's what life asks of us. But often, authorship happens in the small moments, in the decision to speak up, to rest, to try again, to tell the truth, to forgive yourself, to start writing that book, to ask for help. Don't underestimate the power of micro moments. That's where your life is being shaped, minute by minute, word by word. So here's your invitation. Take the pen back. No matter how long you've been following a script, no matter how stuck you feel, no matter how messy your past, this is a new page. This is a fresh chapter. You don't need anyone's permission to begin again. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to be willing to listen to your own voice, to your own heart, to your own rhythm. That's where your real life begins. That's where the story shifts. Not with perfection, but with presence. Not with a grand plan, but with a single, honest choice. This chapter is the start of something real, something deeply human, something only you can live. And I'll say this, because it matters. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be to begin. Right here, right now, with a pen in your hand and your story still unfolding.